with all due respect.
All right, recording is in progress. As always, the first 7 minutes of our conversation is always good. Then we record it, and then we record it. Three-part series on 3 reasons you're not losing fat or weight that have nothing to do with diet and exercise. What was number 1? Do you guys remember? Hormones. Number 2/A, B, and C were your gut issues. So we did 3 gut issue videos. And today is environmental factors. Okay, right? And when we think of environmental factors, obviously I'm going to pull up something real quick. When I think of environmental factors, I think of, I don't know, breathing air conditioning all day, mold in the homes, plastic waters we drink. I mean, shoot me in the, like, tell me if I'm way off, right? Phytoestrogens in products we use. I know a family that lived on a golf course. Their child had rheumatoid arthritis. They moved off the golf course. She no longer had rheumatoid arthritis, and she was a dancer. Say what you want about how they treat it.
Right.
I'm going to read, Mike, can I read what the text you sent us?
Sure. Yeah, we can.
Mike, we were talking about it. Me and Gray are like, lotions, household products. We're like,
shampoo.
Yay, shampoo. Let's poop on shampoo. Here's where Mike comes in. Mike says, I really want to discuss the paradigm of disease versus health with regards to lifestyles and how we're focused on germ and terrain theory as a society, and why we need to be focused on all of the key lifestyle tenets which our group espouses. Essentially, the idea of, do you want to die fast or slow? Okay. We can also discuss toxigenic exposure, circadian rhythms, environmental considerations, mold, pesticides, etc., and how all of those contribute to change in the gut leading to chronic illness. I think one of the things you said that is the biggest right here is essential the idea of, do you want to die fast or do you want to die slow? I'll add to it. Do you want to die well, or do you want to be miserable the last 15 years of your life? I've seen some research, and God, who's the crazy guy that always fights everybody about muscle volume?
Talking about Lane Norton?
No, the other guy. He wrote all the Bodio. He's a big Bodio, this rapid fat loss guy.
Oh, Lyle McDonald.
I got kicked out of his group. My claim to fame. I got kicked out of his group.
Why am I not surprised?
Lyle McDonald says there's no research that says health and fitness and eating better makes you live longer, but there is research that shows it makes you live better. That a majority of majority of life expectancy is based off solely genetics.
Okay.
I don't know. I don't look into it, but it's interesting. But it does lead up the fact: do you want to die well and age well, or do you want to have these comorbidities for the last 10 years of your life and be absolutely sick and miserable? Because I'm telling you right now, they lead to other problems, right? Yeah. So when we think of environmental exposures and why you're not losing weight, we keep this to being healthy, losing weight, being a good healthy size. What are the main things we need to be looking at? What is the average person watching this video going to get from something that we're going to talk about?
I think the biggest takeaway for people is they're really looking at these videos and they're looking for the one thing. So what's that it factor that really is going to shift the whole balance for whoever it is, for me, for you?
Yeah, does that even exist?
Really going to give me less fat, more muscle. I'm going to have more energy. I'm going to sleep better. I'm going to be able to be more focused at work, focused for my kids, productive, make more money, all of those different things, which is great. But the thing you want to be thinking about is, and that quote, die fast or die slow, it's from Peter Attia. And so Peter T is an MD. And so he talks about this concept, which I think people need to kind of grasp and wrap their heads around. And I'll give you a few more analogies for it. So die slow means that you acquire a lifestyle that you basically live to the full life expectancy, but you have lost your vitality in life well before you actually die. So you might live to be 75 or 80, but really you have lost the ability to do all the things that you love to do. And you've also lost your energy. You've lost pain-free movement. You've lost the ability to sleep well, to eat well, to move well, to think well, decades prior to that. Versus the flip side of that is I want to die fast. So maybe it's a acute issue where you live to be 95, but all of a sudden you just pass away in your sleep. And that's really the goal of what we're going for. We want somebody to not only have longevity in life, but also quality within that longevity. And so the other thing you want to be thinking about as just a general paradigm within our society, we are sold the idea that humans wait to break. And then once they break, then they go to the doctor and they get fixed. But you really want to be thinking about kind of two different people in this puzzle. So do you want to deal with firefighters or do you want to deal with contractors? So imagine your body like a house. And so if that house is on fire, you need the fire department there, right there, to basically douse the house with water, to be chopping down the front door with an axe to get inside and remove what's valuable to really save that structure. The flip side is once the fire's out, you need a general contractor who is going to be able to remodel that home in a safe and effective way to prevent future fires. And medicine is the firefighters. They're not the general contractors. So you're not going to go to your doctor. Generally speaking, there are some very good ones out there, but they are kind of far between. So I'm not trying to throw a general umbrella here over medicine, but insurance companies get involved in this conversation. They limit what people can and cannot do, even if they have very, very good interests in preserving patient health. So once the fire is out, if the fire department continued to stay there, they would serve no purpose at that scene anymore. So that's where you want to be then working with a contractor to say, hey, how can we put in sprinklers and fire alarms in the future? The fire alarms in your house are going to be things like lab markers. They're going to be also at-home tests that you can do. There's a very simple one that came out of Brazil. Can you stand up off the floor without using additional points of contact? So your hands, your elbows, all these different things. And so it starts from a score of 10. Every time you touch the floor with an elbow or a hand or a knee, you lose a point. And generally from that study, they found that the more points that you lose, the more times you have to touch the floor, it generally correlates with a reduced longevity in life and an increased risk of all-cause mortality, all the things that could potentially kill you.
I've heard you say that before, where you've said if you want to look at a functional human, you've said this years ago. If you want to find out how functional a human being is, watch them get off the floor without using their hands.
Right.
Or just watch them get off the floor.
Totally.
Like
sure.
You see people groan and roll and yeah, that makes tons of sense.
Yeah, absolutely. So really, and this is the paradigm that when we zoom out from all of this nitty-gritty detail, you want to be thinking about, where am I at on that spectrum? If you're having an acute fire, so if you're having a heart attack or a stroke, yes, you need wonderful firefighters who are extremely smart at what they do, that are going to put the fire out and help you preserve that building.
I.e. good doctors, right?
Absolutely. We need
good doctors. 100%.
Yes, you break your arm.
That's important to say, because I don't want someone to watch this sometimes and be like, watch the video with all those guys. They hate doctors. That's not, I don't feel that way at all. I know some great doctors.
And like I said earlier, some of this is not their fault. Their fault, meaning those providers directly. Some of it is the system that they are forced to work within and the amount of loans they accrue during school and what they have to pay back. It's a very convoluted issue. So that's where, if you have an acute issue, medicine works wonderfully well, saves lives every single day. And if you have a chronic issue, though, the vast majority of individuals living with chronic issues, even when you take medications to shift their lab markers into a normal range, do not generally do not feel better, have more energy, and sleep better. Generally speaking. So if you have high blood pressure and you're stressed up to the max, and you take, let's say, a beta blocker or an ACE inhibitor, any of these drug classes that help to reduce blood pressure, even if those numbers come back down into range, you will likely sense a mild improvement if you're getting headaches from that blood pressure, something like that. But as a general rule, you're not going to have more energy and you're not going to be more focused. All those other factors that are kind of subjective, those things generally don't change when you start to shift those health markers back into the normal range. So this is where you need to understand the paradigm of, here's what we're taught from a very early age. You wait to break, just like your car. Once it breaks, then you take it somewhere, somebody else fixes it, and then you don't worry about it again until it breaks again. The flip side of that equation is we need to be thinking about, hey, I probably need to understand a little bit about my car so that if the tire looks flat, I can probably do something to fix that in the interim, make sure it's not a bigger problem, solve that small problem, and keep moving forward. And it doesn't disrupt every aspect of my life. And really, we don't get taught those things in society. So it comes down to really two factors. Education. You can sum up health into two things. Education, when you look at the studies on what are the biggest indicators of health of a person's lifespan, the biggest factor with that is education. And this is not only structured education, but this is also self-education. And so when you're looking at those individuals that tend to struggle with a variety of health concerns over the course of their life, they tend to be from lower socioeconomic classes, but also lower education levels. This is just generally across the board. This isn't my opinion. It's supported in the statistics and the literature. And the second thing that you 100% have control over is self-discipline. And so those are the two biggest factors that generally control health in a global scale for the individual, meaning that a variety of different tenets in a person's life, generally speaking, because obviously some things can happen to you and it's out of your control. But usually if you become more educated on a topic and then you understand how to consistently apply those things with self-discipline, you will get healthier, whatever the metric is.
Within those self-disciplines, there are little notches underneath that, which there's little points underneath that when you look at habit change. I've heard you say, yes, education is important, but culture, community, leading by example, and environment are way more important than some of that. Yeah.
Right. Totally. And that's where I'm speaking in, it's kind of sweeping generalizations.
Yes.
So you can pick this apart. If you took out a soundbite, you could say, well, he's wrong on this. Agreed. But again, we don't have an hour and a half to really kind of go through all this. Yeah. So that's where, when you're thinking about this generalized paradigm, you want to be thinking about this all the time. Go watch TV for 5 minutes. I can guarantee you in those 5 minutes, if they're commercials, you're going to see at least 2 drug commercials. It's going to happen every single time. And again, this is the idea. Something's broken. We're going to give you the solution. So you don't really have to work that hard. Anyone that tells you don't have to change how you eat, sleep, move, think, or really breathe, that could be a fifth one that you throw in terms of your day-to-day life. Anyone that tells you don't have to change one of those 5 tenets and you can still become healthier and feel better, they're lying. Like, I'll just tell you flat out right now. So if someone wants to pitch you on this idea of, hey, you can still do whatever you want, eat whatever you want, live however you want, lack sleep, live on caffeine, and I'll show you the way that you can still feel better. All you gotta do is take this one pill. I'm just going to tell you right now, it's not going to work.
How many times have we heard that? Hey, what if I told you you can lose fat without changing your lifestyle and stop eating all the things you like and don't even have to work out? Look at this person, they lost 10 pounds. Well, things like that were phentermine, right?
It's the Ozempic of today.
Oh, it's the Ozempic, oh my God, I'm so tired of hearing about Ozempic and on all those things. I don't think I even watch it anymore.
I'm having clients ask me about it.
I had a client that wanted to lose 15 pounds, and her doctor said he'd give her Ozempic. And I talked her out of it. She's down 6 pounds in a month.
It's crazy. Like, I have a client who their doctor recommended it, and she already doesn't eat enough. So I'm just like, you're suppressing your appetite even more.
Does she lift weights?
Ozempic. What?
Does she lift weights?
Very lightly.
Okay. If they're going to take Ozempic and not lift weights, they're going to burn muscle, bottom line.
I think the other thing too with Ozempic is because some people watch this conversation and be like, well, you guys are anti-pharmaceuticals. Not at all.
Not at all.
My point with the Ozempic is there's going to be certain people that the risk reward profile is strongly favored towards taking the drug. So if it's going to prevent them from gaining more weight and getting type 2 diabetes and all the other complications with that, yeah, absolutely. All for it. But the individual who, let's say they're 30 pounds overweight and they're like, well, I've been kind of yo-yo dieting for most of my life. I'm just ready to get this off and take this medication. Look into that literature, because I can tell you that the vast majority of studies on this, the one thing that they're not talking about is, yes, there's global weight loss, but what percentage of that weight loss, like you said, Josh, is muscle, and what percentage of that is fat? That is the most important takeaway from any drug that's promising weight loss. Because if you lose, let's say 20 pounds, but 50% of that is muscle. If you're a female and you just lost 10 pounds of muscle,
Ooh.
it'll probably take you at least 3 years to put that back on your body. Like it just is what it is. So you're essentially taking you're cashing a short-term check in the hopes that you can eventually rebuild that bank balance over the next 3 years. Most people aren't going to.
So talking about environmental factors.
Right. Yeah. So, all right.
Okay,
so
that's fine. That's fine.
Hard right turn. So the reason why I paint that picture is when we start talking about this environmental piece, this kind of gets shoved into the corner and people are like, environmental stuff, mold, that's really kind of you to your allergist for that. And maybe you're allergic to mold, but if you're not allergic, it's not a problem. Well, what we really want to kind of unpack here is, as you said, there's certain things that we get exposed to on a daily basis that people kind of brush off, they brush under the rug. That's not a main concern. And the first class that we should probably kind of talk about in a broad generalization is kind of your stronger smelling compounds. So think of these as like your Glade wall plugins and your Febreze air fresheners. Even sometimes they might be like scented trash bags now is like the new thing. So everything has to have a certain smell. So when you look in the literature, initially, these were just a kind of interesting marketing ploy that came out. Hey, we'll make your trash smell better. What they found was that these chemicals over time, they're known as EDC, endocrine disrupting chemicals. And so this is the literature. Initially, it was like, there's no way this can actually happen. And as I talked about in the last video, kind of those 3 stages in medicine, where the first stage is like, this is absurd. There's no way this can actually happen. Stage 2 is, okay, this is a real thing, but it doesn't actually affect humans in any clinical way. And then stage 3 is, hey, look at this new thing we just discovered. You should probably be aware of it. So EDCs were initially kind of a step 1, probably 2 decades ago. Then kind of, I would say maybe within the last kind of 5 to 10 years, it became, okay, they're there, they might disrupt some things. And now it's like, oh, by the way, these really strong smelling compounds that linger for a long time, we now know these disrupt thyroid physiology. We now know these disrupt endocrine physiology in terms of estrogen, for example. So the way these work is 2 of the most common ones are called parabens and phthalates. So when you spray something on your body, let's say it's cologne or perfume, generally those, if they're higher end, they have less of these chemicals, but if they're cheaper, they put more of these chemicals in because they cause the smell to linger longer. So you get a better consumer response to the product. So the person likes that product more because the scent stays around longer. The problem is though, those chemicals tend to actually mimic estrogen within the body. And so they are called xenoestrogens because basically they present to the estrogen receptor and bind to it, even though they're not an actual hormone. So you still get the effects, quote unquote, of estrogen without actually having estrogen in your body.
That sounds horrible.
Yeah, right. So in females, this can become tricky because it can mess with your cycle. In males, this can precipitate things like gynecomastia, or the growth of breast tissue in males. And so this was even, there was even an essential oil, which was linked to gynecomastia in terms of topical exposure. It was called lavender. So when people are talking about these things and they're like, oh, it's natural and it's lavender, and so there's no main concerns with that. Again, it was shown to be an endocrine disrupting chemical, same as these really, really strong chemicals that are potentially in your environment. You walk in most places nowadays and you're greeted with really, really strong smells of some kind. A lot of times those are parabens and phthalates. So that would kind of be the first piece. The second piece that we want to kind of unpack for people is, in general, yes, you can go to an allergist, you can get mold testing and these sort of things, but generally mold is kind of thought of as mainly a respiratory issue. And so if you're not having respiratory issues, you're not having asthma and you're not having wheezing, it's probably not mold. If you really get into the literature on mold and what they secrete, they're called mycotoxins. And it's kind of a mold's natural defense mechanism in life. So out in nature, it secretes these things which kill other organisms so that they can survive in the biological terrain. Well, if you look at mycotoxins in general, they can not only precipitate neurological signs and symptoms, so they can kind of give you tingling and paresthesias in your limbs. They also tend to wreck the immune system and they wreck the GI tract. So they tend to lower immune function and they tend to disrupt the microbiome. We talked about leaky gut a ways back and how that was kind of a fringe idea. And now it's supported by mainstream medicine. Well, what tends to happen with these mycotoxins is they go in and disrupt the microbiome. They can cause that leakiness to increase. They can precipitate food allergies and food sensitivities. So as we talked about before, the food isn't really always the problem. It's more so what's happening to the immune system. So this is just kind of a broad overview of these things. And smart people debate both sides of this. I would encourage you, if you're interested in this topic or you're wondering if this is a problem, there's many different things that you can kind of just be aware of and look for in your own home. You can buy a indoor humidity monitor. That's just $9, $10 on Amazon. Check your indoor humidity. If it's above 55, 60%, there's a pretty good chance that you have the right environment for mold growth. And the EPA now estimates that 50% of indoor buildings are infected by mold. So
we have a good friend. We all have a friend. We all have a relationship, a guy we know, who took over Athletes Arena as a small baby, who is now remodeling the whole inside of his house because his house is a mold that his baby is allergic to, causing major disruptions in things like breathing and health for their kid. They're either told to sell your home, it's their dream home, or do all the remodeling inside of your home because this mold is exactly what your daughter is allergic to.
Right. And that's where medicine will tell you that it's just an allergy type thing. Yep. And that is valid too. But I think now as we're learning more, there's so many other pieces to this whole puzzle. And so this is where big takeaway with mold is treating it with bleach is actually the worst thing you can do. So the EPA doesn't recommend that. This is common knowledge that everybody, you see a little mold, you can just scrub it off with bleach and you're good to go. That's not the case at all. There's so many different types of mold. There's Stachybotrys, which everybody knows about, the black mold. That's kind of like, but then there's also Aspergillus. There's also Chaetomium. There's Fusarium. There's Ochratoxin A. There's all these different molds that are out there. And so this is where environment becomes a bigger concern, because molds tend to also disrupt estrogen metabolism. And so you don't clear estrogens as well. And so when we're thinking about this whole body weight piece, it's like, okay, so this mold thing is happening. How does this even relate to my body weight? Well, you're probably going to be exposed over the course of your lifetime, somewhere, sometime, someplace. And so whether or not you can actually clear that and metabolize that, there's a large genetic component. We won't get too deep in the weeds, but about 24% of the population has a air and genetic metabolism of something called HLA. So these human leukocyte antigen presenting complexes. And so these kind of show the immune system, hey, here's what this is. This is a problem. So let's get rid of it. And so if you have an HLA mutation, you tend to not present those things to the immune system as easily. And so this can also precipitate other autoimmune conditions, which have airs and like HLA-B27, like ankylosing spondylitis, and these other things that tend to correlate with that. So big picture is there's a genetic piece of this puzzle. There's also a variety of lifestyle pieces that can influence how well you clear these things. So mold is another big one. So it's a huge topic. We could talk about it for a long, long time. I've had multiple exposures. So that's kind of how I became familiar with this.
So we've talked about mold. Okay. We've talked about perfumes, lotions, right? These are the ones I think a lot of people know. Mold in the house, perfumes, lotions, phytoestrogens, parabens, right? Things like that. One of the ones that I want you to school me on, cooking food in plastic bowls and plastic water bottles.
Yeah. And if I can add to that too, candles.
Oh, yeah. So we'll start with candles. So they were more of the Yankee Candle. I think they kind of took a hard right turn when all of this started coming out with the different types of chemicals that were being added to candles and what they were burning off and kind of putting aerosolizing. And so a lot of that has changed. As a general rule of thumb, get soy-based candles. Those are pretty much, or beeswax-based candles. Those are going to be your safest options. In general, indoor air is sometimes even dirtier than outdoor air in terms of the particulate matter that's in the air. So you can get air purifiers and go that route if you live near a major highway and you like to burn candles and those sort of things. However, I would just encourage people to circulate the indoor and outdoor air as much as possible. Open the windows at night, get fresh air in. One of the best things you can do, given we live most of our lives indoors, stick your head in your HVAC unit. Just see, I've seen so many HVAC units that had mold in them, that had additional kind of residue from either smoking or from candles, things that were burning off into the air, and then the HVAC was sucking it in and then recirculating. So again, just regular routine maintenance of these things in the house can make a big, big difference. But candles in general, if you like them, choose more of the soy, the beeswax. It's personal preference.
There's a reason why when you open the doors and you go outside or open the doors, people go, oh, it feels good. Right?
Yep.
I mean, don't we gnostically know that that's good for us?
Yep.
Right.
Exactly.
We got 10 minutes, 8 minutes. can you touch on, because this is the one that my mom gets on me about, because my mom doesn't drink tap water. My mom doesn't cook anything in plastic, hates plastic bottles, cooks everything in glass, and puts everything, all her water is in shaped plastic bottles. And she gets on me when she comes over if I cook anything if we do anything in the microwave in a plastic bowl.
Yeah.
Okay. Talk to me. Okay.
All right. So,
but you can understand how some people can look at that and be like, "Come, what are we like?" Right? Like I got a friend of mine that won't be in the room when the microwave's on.
Yeah. So I think you could take all these things to the extreme, probably to the paranoid neuroticism extreme. I'm definitely fine with microwaves. I know some people that won't even use them because they're so concerned about them. I know some people who won't live in certain areas that have too many Wi-Fi routers. So again, you can go really far down the rabbit hole. I think in general, if you're a resilient human being and you're doing many of the other things, they potentially offset some of those needs to be as cautious. Now, plastics, the main concern with plastics is, are you heating them? So if you're storing things in plastic in the refrigerator, really not as concerned about it in terms of like Tupperware and those sort of things. If you're taking that Tupperware out and heating it in the microwave, yeah, I would definitely not recommend doing that, because as soon as you heat that plastic, you are getting leaching of all those chemicals into the food itself, and then you're going to ingest those. And this is the main concern with tap water that's been bottled, because that's what a lot of bottled water is. People think it's purified, but most of the time it is just tap water. And so when you're getting these bottles, you're thinking, well, they're in the supermarket, they haven't been heated up. Right. But the vast majority of those trucks that transport them are not temperature controlled. They are sitting out in the heat. And so as a result of that, you are seeing an increase in microplastics in even purified distilled water. And this is in the literature. And so that's where it becomes a bigger concern if someone is drinking that fairly consistently. I always tell people, from a day-to-day basis, use stainless steel, use glass as your everyday water bottle. But if you're at the beach or you're at the lake or something like that, like, don't be that hyper neurotic person who's like, sorry, I can't have any water that's out of glass, or that's not out of it's out of plastic bottles. You have to be a resilient human and be able to handle some of these exposures. Doing them every day is the biggest problem. And that's the same thing for all of these things we're going to talk about. You're not going to eat ice cream every single day, but if you can't handle ice cream every once in a while because your gut's so jacked up, provided you're not, I don't know, anaphylactically allergic to dairy, that's an additional problem. You need to be a resilient human being. You need to handle sometimes without sleep or with less sleep. And you need to be able to handle sometimes where you train a little bit too hard, and you need to know how to bounce back from that. So you need to have resiliency on both ends of that spectrum. Plastics, though, it's a conscious choice that we make. There's no real benefit to heating them up other than it's convenient. Just use Pyrex, take the plastic lid off and heat it up, put a paper towel over it. This is one where I kind of just have a hard stance on it. I would never heat plastic of any kind, and I just really wouldn't drink out of plastic bottles consistently.
So if we're looking at, if we're taking looking at this from a scientific eye, from a lens of non-bias, there is research that says, there are molds in the house that can really mess you up, right? There are certain chemicals in lotions and perfumes and scented candles and things like that, and plugins that we probably shouldn't have 24/7 running through our house, right? You probably shouldn't heat up plastic and eat out of a plastic bowl, but once in a while having plastic, we should usually have glass, right? Those things can mess with endocrine system. They can mess with hormones. They can mess with toxins in your body, which who know what they do, right? There is scientific literature that shows that maybe we shouldn't do that all the time, right?
Yeah. I think the biggest thing I try to teach with my clients too, like when they have any kind of questions about any chemicals or whatever, is you only have to do, like, you don't have to go 100%. It's really hard to go 100%. I'm not going to give up my really nice shampoo. I love my nice shampoo. I'm not going to go and get like a super natural shampoo, but there's definitely things around my house that I could limit, like heating things up in plastic. I can get a plate out of my cabinet and heat it up on a plate, So I'm just like, you have to do it in phases almost, and just get rid of the things that aren't as important to you, like things that you can live without. You can probably replace your candles pretty easily. And from there, you can keep building on it and see what you like.
I switched deodorants.
Yeah.
And the other thing too is you want to think about like the amount that you're exposed to it. And so, for example, like the deodorant example, all people that they're like, well, you know, I switched to native deodorant, which is like $15 a stick, just as a personal gripe. I just don't want to pay $15 for deodorant.
Yeah.
So I always tell people like, you're not sick or chronically ill because you're not using the right deodorant. But if you're looking for like that low hanging fruit where it's like, what are some things that I can potentially remove? Slathering your whole body with Bath and Body Works every single night when you get out of the shower, maybe want to look into some different options. And this is not to say Bath and Body Works makes you chronically ill. You are a bucket. How much of that bucket is being filled up by all these different exposures? So can you remove some heavy hitters that you're probably drowned in every single day? Air fresheners in your car, in your home, all these things that aren't necessary. They're just nice kind of like to haves, but they're not must haves. So that's where, like you said, Gray, it's a perfect point that pick those things that are really important to you, whether it's a nice cologne or perfume or whatever it is. I love this one candle. Cool. So burn that candle and then get some good ventilation going after the fact. Make sure that if you're utilizing this lotion on your body, that maybe you're spending some time in the sauna throughout the week to help get rid of those things you're exposed to. There's ways to offset these things. The more of these things that you consciously choose to do, knowing they're bad for you, when you have a negative health outcome, you shouldn't be surprised.
You know, it's all fun. It's all fun and games until you have low energy, you can't sleep, you can't lose weight, you feel like crap, and you find out you're working in a place that has asbestos poisoning.
Right.
It's all fun and games until it happens. It's all ha ha. Oh, those guys are crazy.
I'll be fine.
I'll be fine. Don't worry about me. It's because we had a client that me and you worked with, Mike, that, and we found, you asked her straight up, you ever worked someplace with asbestos? She goes, yeah, I worked at a Best Buy and we had that issue. We had to move out the building. Well, it's all fun and games until it happens to you. It's all fun and games until your daughter has got rheumatoid arthritis from living on a golf course, right? It's all fun and games until it happens to you. I'm not an alarmist. I've never been an alarmist. I'm not an alarmist person. But if you can manage some of these things, it might happen 2-3% better, make you feel 2 or 3% better. You add that to a healthy lifestyle. You take that out. You add that to some other things. All of a sudden, you're feeling 15-20% better, and life's a little bit better.
The other thing too that like people need to take away is like a lot of these things seem like very minimal issues, but like you're like, well, I live on a golf course. Like, what's the big deal? Or, you know, I work for True Green Chem Lawn and I just spray lawns all day. What's the big deal?
Yeah.
Please, if you're very concerned about this or you're interested in it, you think it's cool, go look in the literature on one of the most common precipitating factors of many of the leukemias that we experience as adults.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
A lot of it is pesticide and heavy chemical exposure, whether through occupation or whether through location, geographically where you live, downstream runoff, and all these different things. So
watch Aaron Brockovich.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would just throw that out there. Go and do your homework. You need to be educated as a consumer.
Yeah.
And I'll add, there's an Instagram that I follow that I really like that gives me good ideas. And like, again, you don't have to follow everything that she does, but it's called Just Ingredients on Instagram. And she just provides really low ingredient alternatives for everything that you use. Food, chemicals, all of it.
All right. Well, this is good. This is the final one of 3 reasons you're not losing weight. They have nothing to do with diet and exercise. We'll put it out there and we'll get them all out. I appreciate you guys.
We did it.
Yeah.
With all due respect.